Do you see a Habs veteran blue liner moving at this deadline?
I'd be reluctant at this point to make a move. It would have to blow me away. I think Kent's going to wait on a lot of these things and then strike when the team is right on the verge of going where they want them to go.
Well, today I am pleased to welcome Jason Bukala to the show, where we are talking Habs trade deadline. Now, of course, Jason's a former NHL director of amateur scouting. He is the founder of Pro Hockey Group. And of course, he is a well-known and very respected analyst and writer for Sportsnet.ca. Jason, thank you so much for joining us today. I know it's a little bit of a busy week, but we appreciate you taking some time for us.
No, I'm happy to be here. It's busy. It makes it fun when we're this busy, actually. So it's all good. This is great.
That's very true. I'm really looking forward today to talking with you about, the Montreal Canadiens' potential for this week in that final lead up and push to the NHL trade deadline, which takes place at 3 o'clock p.m. on Friday afternoon. But also, I'll in a little bit talk to you about some realistic expectations about what Kent Hughes may or may not do in these last few days leading up to the deadline, because I think a lot of Habs fans feel like last year was probably pretty quiet in terms of trades and the deadline for Kent Hughes, and maybe they're a little anxious for some more action this year. But we will get to that in a minute. The first thing I want to start with really is asking if you can just give us your kind of overhead view, your that 10,000-foot view of what you think Kent Hughes's objectives and priorities are in this final few days leading up to the deadline on Friday.
Well, the first thing that I have to, remind everybody of, and we're obviously all aware of it, is the Monahan deal already occurred, and that
Mhm.
was a savvy bit of business there by Kent. I mean, if you take a look at how that whole flow of that transaction happened, with the arrival of Monahan from Calgary, and then of course the trade to Winnipeg, it's just a win-win for the Habs, isn't it? And it's a real good example of asset management. So where I'm going with the big picture, though, here this week is I honestly think that they're going to be very patient, take stock of maybe an emergency phone call, if you will. And what I mean by that is like a team that's right up against it, and they're like, we really need to fill this, whether it's a 1B goaltending situation with like a Jake Allen, because obviously it's not ideal carrying three goaltenders on the roster, and we definitely want Montembeault and Primo to get more time in practice, and you just want it to be more fluid going forward. Three goalies is a difficult thing to keep everybody fresh through practice and everything. Obviously, David Savard, you're going to hear all these names that are going to be coming up, but if I'm sitting in Kent Hughes' shoes, and as I've got to know Kent a little bit more over the last couple of years, especially in his style of how he likes to operate amongst the league, I think he's going to be very patient, and I think it's wise because this is an organization that has stockpiled draft capital. They've stockpiled assets with prospects. They've got some guys with term left on their deal, so there's no rush. They can kind of plane that out. So ideal situation in a weird kind of way. I know everybody wants Montreal to win sooner than later in your area, but in a weird kind of way, this is actually a good spot that they're in.
All right. Well, let's talk about some of those specific trade targets. We're going to start in the crease. I know this is an area not only that you just mentioned a moment ago, but you actually referenced Jake Allen specifically in a recent article that you had on Sportsnet. And in fact, for our viewers, I'm going to leave a link down in the description below directly to Jason's author page on Sportsnet.ca. I highly encourage you to go check out all of his written content because it is excellent analysis. But Jason, when you look at this three goaltender rotation that the Canadiens have carried all season long, I think this has gone on longer than anyone expected or perhaps wanted to. But Kent Hughes, as you said, practicing patient, has made it very clear he's not going to try to force a trade and that he's willing to go to the summer with this three goaltender rotation if need be. But when we take a look at, the needs that are out there, is there a realistic market for Jake Allen right now?
For me personally, if I'm shopping at Jake Allen waters, it's probably because I've done my due diligence elsewhere, and the cost has been not accommodating for what I was looking for. I like Jake in a certain situation. Lots of structure in front. He's a veteran guy. Obviously, he's going to be low maintenance. He's going to be prepared. So, when you trade a veteran goaltender like that, if that happens, Like, let's not forget, these are human beings, right? Families, wives, kids, all kinds of different things going on. So when you get a person that's already a veteran mindset in the league like him, that move gives me pause, and I'm okay with that, right? The other thing
Mhm.
is that he's got a year left on his deal, so we have to kind of consider all these things. And um, I was really thinking New Jersey was going to be in the mix for a goalie, perhaps Carolina still, with Freddie Anderson coming back from the blood clot issue. Who knows where that goes? Like, you don't know. Like, for his health, like, he hasn't even gotten on a plane yet, right? So, a lot of things that way. But I just don't see the Habs being able to recoup a lot for Jake Allen. So, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a mid-round type of draft selection or a secondary prospect in return, but they have so many prospects right now. They might be able to get a mid-round draft pick and punt it down the road a little bit for later on.
So if that's the case with Jake Allen, then I imagine that the market's even thinner for somebody like Caden Primo, who still really has yet to establish himself as a reliable NHL goaltender, even for a backup. Do you see Primo as being a piece that probably they don't deal with until after the season?
Yeah, I don't see that Primo. I mean, they've given him this much runway this year with this three-headed monster, if you will, and I don't see that they're going to do anything with him now. And it'll be an off-season discussion and see where he's going to go with the franchise going forward. You got to give him more, don't you? Like, you don't. It's difficult for him, especially. I would argue that it's the hardest on him out of the three goalies to have three goalies there, because he's the youngest, and he wants to get more reps and more consistency. Like, every day, know what I'm getting into. So they're too far invested in that. I don't see anything going on with Caden. I think that's just going to be something that evolves in time.
All right, so shifting over to the back end, as we said, David Savard's name certainly has been thrown around quite a bit. Savard himself has come out and made it clear that he wishes to stay in Montreal. We saw Elliot Friedman even this week say that now that certainly might play into Kent Hughes's patience, using your word from a few moments ago. In terms of veteran blue liners for the Canadians right now, that includes Mike Matheson as well. Do you see a Habs veteran blue liner moving at this deadline?
Well, I'm up until about 5 days ago, I thought Savard maybe, as soon as Tanev went off the board, the
Yeah.
next most proficient shot blocker that was available was going to be Savard. And, I think that any contending team would be wise to pick up the phone and at least ask what the cost would be. I do believe that he's a glue guy, though, at the back, on the back end for the Canadians going forward. He's not costing them a lot of money. Again, he's a low maintenance guy. You know exactly what you're getting every day. He's not the quickest guy, right, to space. He kind of defends between the dots, and he fronts the play and blocks shots with that heavy frame of his. But you need people like that around as you continue to build around that younger group on the back end, the Cerubals, the Harrises, obviously the Ghoulies, Lane Hudson, eventually all these guys. And I'd be reluctant at this point to make a move. It would have to blow me away.
I know you mentioned the glut of, it's a good problem to have, the glut of defensive prospects that have some pretty good upside coming through the system for Montreal right now. And I think a lot of fans and even media members alike are pretty excited about that potential for the Canadians in a couple of years. Do we need to be concerned at all for fans who might be attached to some of those? Will Kent Hughes maybe use one or two of those as a trade chip in a package deal?
Yeah, I like the way you position that. So, one of the rules of thumb when you're a director of scouting in the league is don't ever fall too in love with your prospects, right? Like, you draft them and you obviously hope for the best that they're going to turn out to be solid NHL players. But at the same time, you draft them, you hand them off to player development, and then, obviously upper management. So, they're going to have, in a weird way, they're going to have too many, aren't they? Like
Mhm.
Reinbach, you start going down the list, and this is another great problem to have. And some of these guys are those highly coveted right shot D that like, teams fall over each other looking for right shot D, whether it be now at the trade deadline or in the off season. So They got a lot of flexibility going forward. I think that what Kent, if I had to guess, I think Kent's going to wait on a lot of these things and then strike when the team is right on the verge of going where they want them to go. I don't think that
Mhm.
he's going to be, I just want to make playoffs. He's going to be a general manager that says, when I make a big move, and whether it's like, imagine they were in a different slot right now, a different type of category. Then they might be exposing one or two of these young assets to get them over the top with a veteran ad on the back end, or even up front for that matter. So they're in a great spot. Patience, patience, patience. They've done a fabulous job. Like the culture there, from the general manager, the front office, all the way down, the head coach, a rookie head coach. But he's handled that extremely well there, and no surprise, right? Because that's his MO. Marty St. Louis is just a pro. I know I'm foaming at the mouth a little bit here, but I'm really, the entire organization is flush in every position: goaltenders, forward, defense. Patience is a virtue.
It is, and it, as you said earlier, particularly in the Montreal market, that is not always an easy thing to preach, the patience aspect. But my favorite phrase to throw around for our viewers and listeners has always been to temper your expectations and take it slow. So I'm glad to get some backup on that.
Yeah.
So let's just talk about those forwards for a second. Last year, Kent Hughes got calls on Josh Anderson, didn't move him. This year, Josh Anderson has been kind of a shell of what he was in previous years. Is he even on anyone's radar at this point? And frankly, whether he is or isn't, are there any forwards that you think are on other general managers' radars?
Well, I mean, with Anderson specifically, so obviously the goal scoring is just falling right off a cliff. Like, the offense
Yeah,
is almost, it's not non-existent, but it's trending that way, isn't it?
yeah,
So
very
uh,
much.
what if I'm a buyer on Anderson, the hangups, the term and the money. There's absolutely no sugarcoating it. It is what it is.
No.
I don't see Montreal wanting to absorb any of that salary per se. So it's a really rich ad for me. Having said that, though, like when I'm scouting players, there's certain things that I look for. So, can't skate, can't think, you don't have relentless compete, then the rest of your skill attributes don't even matter, if you get my drift. So, Anderson still can play with pace. He's going to bang people, which is a good thing. And I do believe in the right situation, he would be motivated enough to give me that relentless type of compete that I'm looking for. So then you would hope that he might chip in with some secondary offense.
Yeah.
I can't get over the salary. Like, I can't get past it. So it's I don't see it happening. I would be shocked if it happened. Even if they go, like, that's a contract that would have to land on two doorsteps before it got to an
Mhm.
end user, if you will, just because you'd have to filter out so much money on its way to wherever it's going. Anything's possible. Right now, that's a stretch for me.
And we know, Kent Hughes isn't averse to retaining salary on players, but we also know that he's very limited in what he can do with that in terms of this trade deadline, because he's already got a couple in play
Right.
with Petrie and Edmondson. So also throws another wrench into the whole process. Here is last question for you. Here is a question that's really specifically geared towards our viewers. Most of our viewers are passionate Habs fans, and so you've been talking about patience. I imagine that's going to come into your answer on this. But if you could give Habs fans one top piece of advice in terms of, you know, being antsy about the Canadians taking another big step in their rebuild process, your top piece of advice for them in terms of what their expectations should be for this trade deadline. Is it going to be Kent Hughes is going to make a big splash and make a lot of noise, or maybe temper that a bit and expect something a little more moderate?
Yeah, moderate at best. I really think that Kent's going to be an off-season type of mover and shaker more than this week, unless he gets blown away by some offer that's like, I can't refuse that, right? So,
Right.
but honestly, again, I don't want to sound boring for your viewers and listeners, but
Not at
this is
all.
this isn't going to be one of those active weeks in my estimation for the Habs. It's not. They're going to take calls. They're going to take calls on
Mhm.
Savard, and they're going to take calls maybe on Anderson. I don't know, but they're in a position that they don't have to do anything, and I don't see them forcing the issue themselves. So, yeah, they'll answer the phone because that's part of the process. But I think it's just going to be a slow burn this week, and we'll punt it to the off season.
I think league wide now, we're all just waiting to see, are we going to follow the trend from the last couple of years where there's a giant flurry of activity in the lead up to the deadline and then
Yeah,
kind of crickets on deadline day? That's the big question for all of us right now, I
it
think.
doesn't make for good TV when we're sitting there just twiddling away. Like you can only make up so much after a while, right? So,
As someone who used to do live television, I can absolutely relate with to you
yeah,
with that, and, many props to all of you guys who managed to get through trade deadline day when there's not a lot going on. I think it's safe to say, in general, we are all on the edge of our seats waiting to see exactly what is going to unfold this week, both with the Montreal Canadiens and just with the league in general. There's a lot of really interesting possibilities that are on the table. And you just gave us some really, really valuable assessments about what Kent Hughes might do, which I know I appreciate and our viewers will appreciate. Thank you so much, Jason, for being here today.
absolutely. Thanks for having me anytime. And I'll look forward to when they turn the corner here and we're talking about playoff hockey in Montreal.
Absolutely. Thank you again to Jason Bukala for joining us. Remember to click the link down below in the description to find the link to Jason's written content over at sportsnet.ca. You've got to check that out. We also hope to have him back again next time, however, on the Canadiens Connection podcast with Rick Stevens, which will be a fantastic conversation. But hey, if you missed the latest episode of that podcast where Rick and Michael laid out all of their final thoughts and analysis on this last week before the trade deadline, well, then you're going to want to watch this video right here, and we'll see you again next time.